Since centuries ago, African Americans have experienced discrimination more times than any other minority group. In 1983, Alice Walker introduced the term colorism, which is prejudice or discrimination against individuals with a dark skin tone, typically among people of the same ethnic or racial group. Literature suggests this stems back to slavery, when slave masters awarded special privileges to African Americans of a lighter skin tone. Colorism isn't just a relic of history, it's a pervasive issue affecting people's lives today, from marriage to job prospects. Research shows that dark-skinned women face lower marriage rates, while wage gaps also exist between lighter and darker-skinned men. Shockingly, skin tone even influences prison sentences, with darker-skinned women receiving harsher punishments. Discrimination starts young. Dark-skinned girls are 3 times more likely to be suspended from school compared to lighter-skinned peers. And it doesn't stop there. Colorism can even warp how we're remembered. For example, job interviewers are more likely to recall educated black individuals as having lighter skin, regardless of their actual complexion. This ongoing issue takes a toll. Darker-skinned individuals experience more microaggressions, impacting their mental well-being. But what's more surprising is how colorism is not just an external problem, it's internalized within the community, affecting how we perceive and treat each other. Understanding colorism requires examining how we see ourselves, a perspective that varies across communities. According to sociologist Margaret Hunter, even the self-perception of skin tone can be a complex issue, relative to one's social context. So, as we grapple with colorism's implications, we must also confront the underlying biases, both external and internal, that fuel this troubling phenomenon. Colorism is a double-edged sword that cuts both ways. It's perpetuated by broader societal structures and also exists within the black community. While many acknowledge its presence in institutions like the courts and schools, discussions on how it manifests within our own community, especially around marriage, are often brushed under the rug. This avoidance often stems from the painful task of confronting internalized white supremacy. Conversations that do happen tend to circle around individual experiences, missing the broader historical context. We must remember that this isn't just personal, it's systemic and deeply rooted in history. The term colorism itself only emerged in 1983, coined by Alice Walker. Prior to that, phrases like colorstruck were used, reflecting a long-standing but largely unnamed issue. It's not just an American issue either, it's global. The worldwide sale of skin bleaching creams attests to this fact. Conversations with women of color from various communities, including Indian and Bangladeshi Americans, reveal that colorism takes different but equally damaging forms worldwide. And often this issue impacts how we perceive ourselves in terms of labor and value. So why the reluctance to talk openly about it? Acknowledging colorism means diving into its complicated history and our collective denial. But naming it is the first step towards healing and change. Colorism doesn't just shape our love lives, it affects our careers, our self-worth, and how society values us. Ever notice how light-skinned women of color are often the ones hailed as literary geniuses or rising stars? This isn't just coincidence, it's an extension of deeply rooted biases. The elephant in the room? Internalized white supremacy. Even if white people vanished tomorrow, colorism would persist in our communities. That's the brutal truth many are hesitant to confront. So, where did this all begin? Trace it back to America's dark legacy of chattel slavery. Under that system, being close to whiteness could sometimes offer a narrow path to freedom. After slavery was abolished, this didn't just disappear, instead, it evolved. Enter the one-drop rule, which held that even a trace of black ancestry made someone not white, reinforcing social hierarchies based on the shade of one's skin. The impact of this history lingers, making colorism a complex issue that's not just skin-deep, but ingrained in the very fabric of our society. During the era of slavery, colorism wasn't quite as cut and dry as today. Take the Creole communities of New Orleans and Charleston. Descendants of enslaved black women and white slave owners sometimes managed to establish themselves as free people of color. But as America segued into legalized segregation, any flexibility around defining mixed-race heritage hardened. Fast forward to the black press in post-Civil War America, and you'll find a fractured dialogue on colorism. The debate was so polarized it mirrored today's conversations about privilege and racial hierarchy. Darker-skinned journalists called out the skin tone-based divisions in churches and politics, while the lighter-skinned elite countered that color wasn't a deciding factor for success. Consider two contemporaries, Nannie H. Burroughs, a dark-skinned civil rights activist, and Alice Dunbar Nelson, a light-skinned teacher. Burroughs called out colorphobia in the black community as being as toxic as white people's negrophobia. Yet she was barred from teaching in D.C. public schools due to her complexion, while Nelson thrived. So, what's changed? Not much, it seems. Conversations have evolved from whether colorism feels real to debates about its very existence, much like the social divisions that birthed these dialogues in the first place. The question isn't just whether colorism exists, but how deeply it's woven into the fabric of Black American life. The fight against colorism isn't just about dismantling external prejudices, it's also about confronting our own internal biases. While systemic racism has undoubtedly shaped these perspectives, the onus is on us to break this damaging cycle. We can't fully heal unless we acknowledge that we too have played a part in perpetuating these harmful narratives within our community. This doesn't absolve systemic structures for their role in creating this problem, but it does empower us to be part of the solution. If we're critical of how society marginalizes us based on skin tone, we must also challenge ourselves to celebrate the diversity and richness of all shades of blackness. It's easy to point fingers and harder to turn the mirror on ourselves. But our collective well-being depends on doing that difficult work. We have to cherish the beauty and worth in every shade of our community if we expect the world to do the same. Only then can we present a united front against the broader issues we face.